Today's question is, what is the connection between sex and spirituality? It's a very heavily loaded topic. In fact, it's so heavy that even when you utter it with the softness of a rose petal, sex, it falls on you like a sledgehammer. That's because of all our ideas and all the social conditioning that has been added onto this idea of sex. So let's try and move beyond these ideologies and try and understand the relevance of sex to an individual's search. Because either ways, you have to acknowledge, you have to accept that it is one of the most fundamental driving forces of your life. More often than not, you are driven by the desire for sex than any other desires. So without understanding the desire for sex, you will not be able to understand the desire for spirituality, the desire to seek something beyond you. So even before talking about the connection between sex and spirituality, or what exactly sex is, let's try and understand what is sex now in the popular view or understanding of people. How do they view sex? What ideas do they have? Only when we begin with our preconceived notions of sex can we move beyond it. See, first, the moment you utter the word sex, just gently close your eyes and utter the word sex, the first feeling that swells within you is the feeling of guilt. The first thing that you will notice after uttering that word is, who has heard it? I hope nobody heard what I just said. It's as if you're disclosing a secret of a murder. Or even worse, you've committed an unspeakable crime and you don't want anybody to hear about it. Now, why is this? Why cannot we simply accept and acknowledge sex as a very important driving force of life? And why aren't we open about it? Why isn't the society open about it? In fact, almost all kinds of hypocrisy in the world is around sex. People talk about it, or rather, they don't talk about it, but then all the intentions and desires deep down is very sexual. Let me start from religion. How religion is responsible for sex being so loaded with guilt. There's a story of Adam and Eve. They're in the Garden of Eden and they are tempted to eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge. This is the tree, if they eat the fruit of knowledge, they'll get to know the difference between right and wrong. And in knowing the difference between right and wrong, they become like gods. In a sense, they will know themselves. So that is the original sin. If you think about it, knowledge is the original sin of humanity. In fact, the Hebrew word to know actually means to make love. Hebrew Bible talks about the love making between Adam and Eve as a process of knowing themselves. It is how they came together and explored themselves, and in that process they became aware of themselves. Now, why is such a simple, such a beautiful thing a sin? It is a sin because religions wanted it to be a sin. Because that was the biggest weapon religion could use against mankind. Because somewhere there is this underlying current of religion to subjugate people and to make them believe in what you're telling them. And also, religion always possesses the key to the door to heaven. So there was a time when, I would say even now, salvation happens only through the church. So you cannot find your individual salvation. Now, sex, if it is a way of knowing and if it is not sin, then there is the solution. There is the answer to all the problems. Because we all know that one of the most blissful of experiences happens through sex. In fact, man knows, even if there is a glimpse of bliss that he has experienced in life, it has happened through sex. And that glimpse of bliss is what drives him towards sex. If sex was not a pleasure, if it was negative to the body and individuality, if it was creating problems to an individual, then automatically he would have abstained from it. There is a natural affinity towards sex. It's because it is the natural flow of the energy of the body. And also, the ancient religions, they were not even religions, ancient spiritual practices always regarded sex as a very high, they had always given sex a very high status. For example, pagans worshipped sex, Hindus worshipped sex. Think about it. Shivalingam, which is probably the world's most common religious symbol after the cross, is basically a phallus. I mean, most people don't even know this. Every day, hundreds and thousands of Indians bow down to the sexual symbol of male and female. In fact, lingam literally means sex. That is where the words strilingam and pullingam comes from. Strilingam is a female sexual element and pullingam is a male female element, male sexual element. Sex had never been a sin because people knew that through this union, the bliss that you experience is basically the gateway, the door through which you can explore the hidden dimension of life. And that is the gateway to heaven in a way. The church looked at sex very differently. On the one hand, they made the simple processes of sex a sin. And on the other hand, the popes and the priests remained celibate, if they ever were. I'll come to that topic a little later. First, for a moment, let us assume that they were celibate. So imagine a person who is not able to control his sexual desires. Nobody is able to control their sexual desires because it is a force, right? And if you have made sex a sin, if you're not able to control it, then you're a sinner. Then who would you go to seek direction about life? You would go to a non-sinner. And who's a non-sinner here? The priest, because he's celibate. This game, they've been playing it so well, so beautifully, they have blinded people into believing that they are celibate in the first place, and in the second place, sex is sin. Now, this has been the biggest cover, the veil religion has drawn to blind man. And I would say anybody who is against sex, they have to be the greatest hypocrites in the world. Because they have come through sex, their whole mind and body is sex, their hormonal flow in the body is sex. And when they see a woman or when they see a man, the first desire that arises is sex. If they have acknowledged this and yet they don't want to project it, they don't want to talk about it, they want to project it to be something negative, then they have to be the greatest hypocrites in the world. In that sense, popes have to be the greatest hypocrites. Anyways, there are very good examples, historically recorded examples of how hypocritical popes have been. There was this one guy by name Julius. I mean, you can almost call him hilarious. but for now, let us assume that his name is Julius. Julius III Del Monte, that was his name. Now, he was crowned the Pope. He was not interested in spirituality, he was not interested in religion, and Christ was forgotten a long time ago. He was not interested in reviving art or bringing anything new to the church. The first thing that he did was, about 4 years ago, he had fallen in love with a 14-year-old boy, a boy from the streets, and he had forced his brother, who was pretty rich, he had forced his brother to adopt that kid. Now, the first thing that he did after becoming Pope was he ordained the now 17-year-old boy as a cardinal. When Vatican was going on an inquisition, torturing, burning, and killing people who were homosexuals, branding them as homosexuals, this Pope was having private parties with this 17-year-old boy. The easiest way to understand this is try and control your sex desire for 1 week. You will know how difficult it is. Just give it a try. For 1 week, abstain from sex completely. Abstain from all thoughts of sex. Abstain from, anything that induces this sense of sex. Stay away from all those things that you watch. And just be within yourself for 1 week. Just notice your body at the end of 1 week. Just notice the change of desires in your mind. Your body will start craving for another body. It becomes an obsession. Your body wants to feel another touch of another skin. Because now this energy has been surging in your body and you have no way to let it out. This is the foundation. This is the point where sex becomes perverted. When sex energy is controlled, it starts to express itself in most ugliest forms. This is where we get these unimaginable human terminologies like pedophile. Like, wow, this is actually a practice. Sexually abusing children. Now, imagine if you have been projecting an image to people that you're celibate and you don't want to have sex, but this energy is swelling up inside you. Of course it will express itself in some idiotic form. And since they think that they are ordained by God to do the work that they are doing, they can give justifications however you want. There was one guy when he was asked, were you molesting children? He says to the television, to the reporter, he says, but I was not deriving any pleasure out of it. This is the level of hypocrisy in which they live. They think that whatever they want, they can do, and they can justify it in the name of religion. Naturally, people have been living in this false idea that sex is sin. And every person who has ever experienced a sense of guilt within themselves by the thought of sex, that guilt comes from religion. Sex is not sin. Let us first basically understand that. It is a wrong idea. It is a false concept. Sex is a door. It is a window to the possibilities that can illuminate your very process of living. Sex is 100% spiritual. It had always been spiritual till these religious, religious nuts who came in and changed everything. Sex was a very simple process. It was a divine union between male and female. See, now, because of this repression of sex by religion, the other part of the society that is rebellious against this idea of sex being sin have embraced it to a point where it has become very grotesque, where it has become perverted. Think about it. rape is such a human phenomenon. When was the last time you ever heard that a congregation of cats, one cat came and complained that it was raped? Animals don't go through these problems at all. When was the last time we heard that there was pedophile amongst mosquitoes? It never happens. The reason is there is a natural order. There is a natural flow to sexuality, the energy of the body, and they know how to get into that and get out of it. But we have suffocated man so much by constantly telling him that it's sin, it is wrong. He has, of course, invented his own ways of expressing himself, and sometimes unnaturally. Sex has become one of the most unnatural things in our society now. Both those who condemn sex as well as those who indulge in sex, both have become unnatural. Those who condemn it have become unnatural by killing this force, this energy within them, and leading it, that has led to so many perversions. And those who have indulged in it have diverted all their creative energies into just sex. So all the time, morning till evening, the only thought that they have in mind is sex. And they cannot look at a woman or a man without a sexual thought. Because it has just become a part of their daily living. They've been fighting and fighting this process, and they have become a part of that fight. Otherwise, sex is just like a thirst. When you drink water, when your thirst is quenched, you forget all about it. You don't constantly keep thinking about water even after your thirst is quenched. But think about it, sex is the only thought that a man or a woman can occupy in their mind throughout the day. It's the only thought that is given that is being given a permanent place in the mind. Why? No other animal, no other living creature lives that way. When they want to have sex, they'll have sex. When they think about it, a thought arises. Otherwise, they're perfectly normal. And since this thought of sex is constantly in the mind, that has become the source of anger, jealousy, fear, frustration. I mean, you can pretty much link this suppression of sex to all the violence that has been perpetrated in the world. Man has become violent because of this repressed sex, because of these ideas, because of these concepts that have made him so unnatural.